In a world where greed, inequality, and political injustice has affected many innocent people and minority groups, Bob Gnaizda was there to restore the hope and change the lives of those affected and less fortunate. He convinced Ronald Reagan to give away millions of dollars worth of food to the poor that would have been otherwise wasted and dumped in the ocean. He convinced the White House and Congress to allocate a larger number of food stamps to a wider range of groups in need. He convinced the state of California to cut CEO salaries and instead use those funds towards creating more jobs for women and minorities, as well as improving minority housing and providing more people with homes. He was also a veteran of the civil rights movement and helped African American minorities gain control of their vote. In general, he has gone bravely where not many have gone before, selflessly standing up to many powerful people and governmental institutions for the sake of humane justice, letting leaders know that the poor and middle class can no longer be ignored and excluded, and that change must be implemented to better the lives of millions of people. His legacy has changed human history for the highest good possible and will never be forgotten.
Well, my view was that if I was going to make change, I could not do it in a conventional way. And everyone was hostile. Everyone tried to provoke me in different ways. Everyone told me in one way or another to get out of town. They couldn't stand an independent legal service program that was going to represent the poor against the powerful.
If I describe you, you're like the practical Robin Hood, because I know you've done the police officers here in San Francisco, women to become a police officers. You also won the case of the food stamps.
Yes.
I mean, what else have you done, Bob?
Well, I've brought a lot of cases against corporations, and I've taken on government when government has refused to recognize its democratic principles.
How many cases have you won?
Hundreds. I almost always had a CEO on the stand that I was cross-examining.
And you gave up all the income that you could have made. You never took anything for your own good.
Well, but I've always had enough. And having 10 million a year as opposed to 150,000 is not that valuable.
That's amazing. It's amazing. Bob, just say advice like in 3 words or 5 words to the people that adores you.
Well, I don't know how many people adore me, but my advice...
I do!
Well, thank you. I would say my advice is to be true to yourself and follow your convictions, and don't be that afraid, because the consequences most of the time will be beneficial.
Thank you so much, Bob, for all the work that you've done for all of us.
Well, thank you very much, Faith, for letting me work with you and your great team.
Thank you.
It's always a great pleasure for me to honor a kid like Bob here, years younger than I am, so it's a particular pleasure. I'm sure I have great hopes for him when he grows up. I made a couple of notes. CRLA, I have DC complaint, it says. That's always been one of my favorite activities that Bob was involved in. He filed a complaint which he sent to the White House against several agencies because they didn't have proper affirmative action programs. And it was so well done that the lawyers in the White House thought it was a formal complaint, and they called him to see if they could get an extension of time to answer his complaint. Bob, we're all proud of the work that you've done for all these years.
You know, leadership is about inspiring people, and that's what Bob does. He inspires people through his courage, through his intellect, through his good-naturedness, and for his heart, and for what he wants to do on behalf of people in this country. And that inspires others to want to be like him and emulate him. And if I can pack into my experience, you know, what he's packed into in his 60 years in this business and doing what he's done, I'll feel very lucky. And you guys are lucky to have him, and we're all lucky to know him.
I guess the most important thing I want to say about Bob Gnaizda, and I say it to many people, is he is the most imaginative and effective lawyer that I've ever worked with. Bob won the Lauren Miller Award from the California Bar Association, naming him the most effective public interest lawyer in California. As far as I know, he's been the most effective public interest lawyer in this nation. Let me give you an example of how efficient and effective Bob can be. Back in the 1980s, Bob was one of the first people to understand the significance of the census, the allocation of billions of dollars of federal welfare and other social programs were determined based on census data. So Bob, instead of filing a lawsuit or writing an article, he sent a letter to the Secretary of Commerce in the Reagan administration who controlled the census. And he pointed out in this letter that Mexican Americans and other people of color had been grossly undercounted in the federal census and were therefore being unjustifiably deprived. The consequences of that letter, which took him about 30 minutes to write, was probably in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in reallocated federal funds that benefited working people.
Bob is unafraid, Bob is fearless, and Bob will fight until he cannot fight anymore for those people that are underserved, whether they are minorities or low and moderate income people. Bob is a fighter and he doesn't give up. Bob will fight until he takes his last breath. Bob cares about people. He treats everyone with dignity and respect. Bob may disagree with you on an issue, but he is not disagreeable.
How would you describe him as a leader?
So I think he's tough, he's assertive, he's thoughtful, he's persuasive, he's moral. I think that's some people, that's not a word you use, but I think it's a good word to use. He's moral. He's always had a lot of moral integrity, and I think that's always given him the high ground in his leadership. And he's just been an effective advocate and friend and advisor. I always listen to him, still listen to him. He's always had access to the top leadership in Washington. That's because it's always worth listening to what he has to say. And I think of Bob that way, as the happy warrior. He never gives up, but he always maintains a positive attitude, and he's been so effective over the years. So I wish him well, and I think congratulate him on that. Don't stop, Bob. Keep it up. Whatever you're doing next in retirement, please stay involved. Now more than ever, we need a voice like yours.
I was the vice president of the Bank of California, and under very unusual circumstances that weren't related to me, I was involved in protecting one of the black high-ranking employees in the bank. And when I left the bank, I said to them, you really can't treat minorities and women the way you do. I'm going to make a change in that. And I went to all of the famous lawyers in San Francisco. I went to the government agencies that are supposed to be in charge of issues like minority employment. They all told me to go to hell, politely. I finally found Bob Gnaizda. He brought the case, we won, and Bob took that victory, went to all of the major financial institutions and said, sign on to this too, which is to put minorities and women in management and high-ranking positions. Banking was and still is probably the most integrated business in America, thanks to Bob Gnaizda.
as we grow older and as there are fewer and fewer of us left, it's very important that we not lose the insight, the information, the knowledge of people and of events that occurred during our time. It's up to us to tell the true history of people, extraordinary people like Bob, who lived in our time. And I'm convinced, as I have been for many years, that Bob is the greatest public advocate in the history of the world. That he, think about it, 50 years of advocacy for minorities, for women, for farm workers, for the handicapped, for low-income people, for disenfranchised people from all over. Almost anybody who was less fortunate could count on help and support from Bob. As a matter of fact, this has been the essence and purpose of Bob's entire life. The banks and the power people would bring in their lawyers from all over the country, and there'd be 100 lawyers in the room representing these utilities, and that would be Bob and I. And I would say, Bob, look at, they got all these lawyers. He said, don't worry about it. It means we're even. The thing that I want to mention, though, and I haven't had an occasion, even though I've known Bob all these many years, I've never had occasion before to say to Bob directly that I appreciate, as a beneficiary of his efforts, the risk and the sacrifices that Bob has had to make over all these many years. Because in order for Bob to be effective, he had to challenge, he had to get in the face, he had to confront some of the most powerful institutions in this country. The power industry, the banks, the insurance companies, and even governmental agencies had to be confronted in order for Bob to be effective. And in doing this, he had to often sail against the current of his time.
Bob, we want to thank you. And I know this is your final answer. You're going to retire, because you've said that many times. But I know this is it, and we know that. So I'm gonna miss you badly. Not just me, but everyone will miss you. You're a special man. You work so hard. You never give up. You're not afraid of anybody. No one is richer than you. No one is poorer than you. But you deserve to retire. And you take care because you left a legacy. You will always be remembered, and wherever you're doing or whatever you're gonna be doing, Bob Gnaizda will always be around, because I will never stop thanking you and will never stop talking about you. We love you so much, Bob. I love you dearly. Thank you.
Your extraordinary work in the field of social justice over the course of the past 50 years has truly inspired us all. You have worked tirelessly on behalf of the underprivileged and underserved. You make this world a better place. Thank you for all of your amazing achievements over the years. And lastly, thank you for the efforts that you put forth to open the doors to success for the National Asian American Coalition, as well as the National Diversity Coalition. Our work will never be done. Thank you for your fearless leadership. We are eternally grateful. Congratulations, Robert Gnaizda.
To the chair first, sir.
You want to speak first?
I'll speak first, and then you can speak.
Okay.
Because we want to give you more of a tribute.
Okay.
Please. No? It's your night, Bob, so you get to do whatever you'd like to do.
Okay.
Well, I truly feel honored to be here this evening. What a wonderful tribute. It really was. And to have the opportunity to be here with you is something that's very special to me. It's my pleasure to be here for this beautiful tribute to Bob's illustrious and inspiring career. I traveled here this afternoon from the East Coast. I'm heading out this evening on a red-eye. But it was important for me to be here to have this opportunity to say a few words about Bob in his honor tonight. Bob dedicated his career to helping the underserved in our society, and I thought if he could dedicate his life to that work, then I could dedicate 10 hours on an airplane to be here with you tonight. Like my own father, of blessed memory, who grew up in the same Brooklyn neighborhood that Bob did, they both loved the Brooklyn Dodgers, right?
Yes, eventually.
Legend has it that Bob would often ride his bike to Ebbets Field just to catch a glimpse of Jackie Robinson. He had been told at an early age that African Americans were rowdy, that they were uneducated. But when he showed up at the ballpark, he soon learned that these were all lies. That African American people that he came into contact with at the stadium were some of the best dressed, most well-mannered, and engaging people he had ever met. At a young age, Bob quickly learned that to treat all people with respect and dignity, to build bridges between communities, to fight discrimination, and to serve the less fortunate in society, and to promote the ideals of equal opportunity for all was what he wanted to dedicate his life's work to. Now, it didn't hurt, Bob, from what I understand, that you were a very smart young man. I'm told that by the second grade, you were able to read the New York Times from cover to cover. Is that true?
Not to cover, but yes, I did read it.
I'm also told that Bob actually didn't need to take a math class until he reached middle school, because by kindergarten he had already learned his multiplication tables, and in the early years of elementary school he was already doing complex division. And so it wasn't until he actually reached middle school that he had to reacquaint himself with math class. As an early adopter of the pay it forward philosophy in life, Bob's uncle helped him through Columbia and eventually Yale Law School. He became a lawyer and turned around and took the blessings that had been given to him in his life and dedicated, as I said, to helping those less fortunate than him. What a career it's been for Bob. We all know he founded America's first legal service program for rural families, California Rural Legal Assistance, working in the Salinas Valley with Cesar Chavez, and later founding and leading, as we heard earlier, many organizations dedicated to fighting institutional discrimination around the country. He's been chief counsel for over 100 class action, court, and administrative lawsuits and proceedings, focusing on minority economic empowerment, civil rights. He founded one of the West's first public advocate law firm, public interest law firm called Public Advocates. But perhaps one of Bob's most enduring professional gifts has been his ability to harness and create new opportunities and to recognize talent and help nurture and grow that talent for the leaders of tomorrow to carry out the mantle and carry on the mantle and bring it forward. Nothing has been a greater representation and illustration of that ability than his work in recent years with NDC and with NAAC. We're so proud of Faith and what she has accomplished, but we know, and Faith will readily concede, that all the credit goes to her friend and mentor, Bob Gnaizda. We know that Bob's retirement is going to create a tremendous void at these organizations, and while Bob's daily presence will be missed, his knowledge, his passion, his energy, and everything that he instilled in Faith and so many people involved in those organizations will carry them forward as they continue to live out Bob's life's work. Finally, for me, I just wanted to add a personal note of gratitude to Bob, myself. When I think about the fact that I've only actually known Bob for 3 years, it seems unbelievable for someone to have made such a lasting impression on me in such a short amount of time. It was in late 2015, probably around this time of the year, when I first became acquainted with him through the transaction that merged my company, Charter Spectrum, with Time Warner Cable and Bright House Networks. Charter Spectrum, we're glad to be a sponsor for this evening's events. But just as Bob had put the finishing touches on Comcast's, on blocking Comcast's bid to acquire the same company that I was now attempting to have the California Public Utilities Commission approve, I was a bit nervous to meet him, as you might imagine. I know that he and Faith would, in that instance, have a big hand in sealing Charter's fate. And as we moved through the process and I got to know Bob better, even as it being the twilight years of a long and prosperous career, I found myself learning from him. He taught me so much about myself and about business, and how business can truly make a difference if it learns and listens to the concerns of its citizens and of the community. He helped me see that there wasn't one way to do things. With a little compromise, a little give and take, and an openness to not just hear, but to actually listen to one another, we would have the ability to accomplish great things. Like for so many of us in the room, Bob has made a tremendous impact on our lives. Knowing Bob has helped us to learn a little bit more about ourselves, what we're capable of achieving, what it means to dedicate yourself to something, how to harness our collective energy and strength to make the world a better place. Putting aside all the awards and accolades and achievements in Bob's career, I think what is probably more meaningful to him is to know that there are people out there like me, and I'm sure all of you, who feel blessed to know him, feel better for the lessons that he taught us, and feel inspired to carry on and continue the work that he has so ably performed. Shakespeare once wrote that our doubts are traitors that make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. Bob is a man who attempted, who did, and achieved great successes. God bless you. I wish you well. And thank you for everything that you've done on behalf of everyone here.
Thank you, Alan.
Coming up.
Well, I've been honored many times. Never like this, though. Never like this. And I'm so glad that my wife is here, and so glad that my oldest son is here, Joshua. Three people have had a huge impact on me who are here tonight. Faith, because faith is capable of accomplishing many things that I'm not capable of accomplishing. My loving wife, Claudia, who ran Cameo and ran Renaissance before that, and is now attempting to organize women, small businesses across the country. I think it will be a greater Me Too movement of success than any that has been attempted by either the Democrats or the Republicans. And my son Josh. Josh joined me at many meetings with corporate CEOs, and he always had an insight that was more valuable than at least those that I had, and probably anybody with the organizations I was with. So I thank all of them. And I thank the many, many people here who I've worked with, and I've disagreed with and then agreed with, because I've never viewed life as my way. I learned at a young age. My civil rights career began really in February of 1965, when with two black attorney friends from LA, I went uninvited to a very tough county in Mississippi, Clay County, where the FBI said they would offer us no protection. But the organization that sponsored me wanted me to write legal briefs in Jackson, and I didn't want to do that. So the three of us went uninvited to Clay County. And then I met the chief judge. There was only one judge. Then I met the sheriff. Then I met the police chief. And then I met the head of the Lawyers Association, which consisted of 6 lawyers. I told them why I was there, and then realized that I had to rely on my vast knowledge of baseball, which I had picked up as a fan of Jackie Robinson in Brooklyn. And that's what did it. It got me around. I survived the 2 weeks. The people in Clay County survived, and later that year, actually on my birthday, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was passed. And that's how I began my official career. But my best friend, Joseph Karp, would say that I began it entering Stuyvesant High School at 14. Stuyvesant was a special high school for extraordinary students, but it had no Latinos, virtually no Asian Americans then, virtually no blacks, and no women. So I submitted an article. The article was to the monthly magazine, and it was entitled, "Where Are All the Girls?" So you know my interest. Well, the school publisher, a senior at Stuyvesant High, told me he liked the article and it would be published. And then the next day, the principal's office called and told me it would never be published. And maybe that's how I began my civil rights career. One other possibility is it began when I was 9. And my mother, who was not alive, could confirm that because the Hebrew school rabbi wished to expel me from Hebrew school because I had questioned the wisdom and tolerance of God as he dealt with Moses. And I felt that it was a form of torture to make him wait 40 years to enter the promised land. My mother rectified it. She just asked him who was their best student. And he said reluctantly, me. And my mother said to me then, in front of him, you'll stay here if you want. So I did. And I became a fan of Israel, the Haganah, and I collected money for them. And I did as good a job collecting money for the Haganah at 9 and 10 as I did for the Green Lining Institute in later years. And I'm very proud, Faith, that you have 39 sponsors who have listed with you, including 21 banks. And I'm hoping that the Bank of India, the State Bank of India, will become your newest sponsor. And they're here today, and I hope Joe Shavating will provide them with the support they need. Now, I wanted to make a couple of comments on Joe Shavating. Joseph, I think Faith and I and most of the members of the Green Line, of the NDC and the NAAC agree with you on your 3 priorities and how you wish to deal with them. We have testified for 10 years that we are opposed to payday lenders, that we would like the banks to do it their way, profitably, but not too profitably. And on CRA had much promise in 1977, but no one fulfilled it. The closest to come to doing so was Clinton's first appointee, but he was unable to do so. We are pledged here, and I will be part of the fight to help you achieve a CRA that rewards truly outstanding behavior and that is eventually blessed by the Federal Reserve and the FDIC and hopefully President Trump. And in general, we've written much about this in the last few years. We agree with your position on fintech. Fintech firms have the opportunity to open up lots of lending possibilities at affordable prices. So we've got to help them, and we're pledged to do so. Now, I wanted to go over what the NDC and the NAAC have accomplished and will possibly accomplish over the next couple of years. Governor Brown, who I worked for in 1975, even though I was a Republican, and Brown asked me about that, and I remember telling Brown that I'm not changing, but I'll be loyal to him as long as I can be. And then I'll tell him when I cannot. In any event, the NAAC brought a lawsuit 4 years ago that has been successful so far against Governor Brown regarding dispersing $331 million that Kamala Harris secured for us. But what no one knows is that it was Faith and I who got Kamala Harris as Attorney General of California to refuse the original settlement and instead insist on over $20 billion, including the more than $300 million for nonprofits involved in CRA activities. I believe California has the greatest housing crisis in America. Homes are not affordable. In the Bay Area, the average price is $900,000. In San Francisco, San Mateo, and Santa Clara, it's well over $1 million a home. This is not affordable. There's a growing divide, and we've got to end that growing divide. And I believe the opportunity will soon be upon us. I know, Faith, that you and your team, and I will be happy to join you, will seek to meet with Gavin Newsom in November, when there's at least a 10-to-1 likelihood he will be the new governor. And I'm hoping from that meeting we will meet with the leadership of both the Democratic and Republican parties and discuss not just the $331 million you have won, but getting a fair share of the $14 billion rainy day fund, at least $2 billion. And I believe that most of the legislature and Gavin Newsom do not support the $80 billion plus high-speed rail system in California, and may decide that some of those billions should be put to another effort, which is affordable housing. And no organizations in America, certainly none in California, are more available and skillful in that than the NAAC and the NDC. I want to just end with a couple other observations. Joseph Otting, you have made many efforts to support a change in the oversight of regional banks. We have been the first to testify as to why that should be. A $50 billion bank is not, as is now known, to be systematically important. We would suggest $250 billion, but we would suggest, as you will hear from us over time, that any bank up to $250 billion should prove itself to be outstanding in its CRA work. And we hope to help you in doing that. And to all the regulators here, including the representatives from the Federal Reserve and the FDIC and from Donald Trump's office, we have developed almost no new banks over the last 10 years. It's time to help them, much as the NAAC has helped Royal Business Bank to become participants, but only when they pledge to outstanding CRA records. And then I'm reminded of one other thing. There are foreign-owned banks across the world that would love to do business in California. We should invite them. I know there's a major bank from India that's here tonight, working with Manufacturers Bank. They should be able to form a bank that eventually is 50 billion or more. And I think the president of India would welcome this. But I think we must offer the olive branch to him, much as Faith offered it unsuccessfully, because the Federal Reserve would not do its part, to ICBC Bank, then the world's largest bank, and certainly the largest Japanese-owned bank. And I want to conclude on this note. We have not done enough in the antitrust field. And Delharam, the new Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, was going to speak to us. He was unable due to pneumonia to do so. But I would like to see us form a committee, including the high-tech companies, that meets with him and decides on a long-term antitrust policy, that if you're valuable to the country and you will make a contribution to the nation, that no matter how big you are, you should be allowed to grow even bigger. So I see the NAAC and the NDC having a very long and successful future. Hopefully, Faith, until you're at least 75. Well, that's 18 more years. Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure.